The courtroom was ice cold. Not from the air conditioning, but from the silence that settled when Clara stood up to speak. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but guilt. Real, suffocating guilt. She couldn't even look at him. My name was barely a whisper in her mouth, my father, Edward Morera, as if saying it too loud might summon a ghost she wasn't ready to face. Across the room, I sat still. Frail on the outside, sure, but not broken. Not yet. My hands were folded, calm. But inside, I was burning. They had written me off. Dismissed my memory, my autonomy, my very identity, because it was more convenient that way. Because I was old. And because she thought I'd stay silent. But I didn't. Today was the day everything shifted. The judge looked at me. I looked back, clear-eyed. And that's when Clara's composure cracked. Her voice broke as she admitted what she'd done. I didn't think he'd fight back. I didn't think anyone would believe him. Her words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire that had already consumed everything. But it was too late to put out the flames. The damage was done. She'd taken control of my finances, sold my home, moved me into a care facility without my consent, and told everyone I was slipping into dementia. The real twist? I remember everything. The doctor she bribed. The conversations she thought I didn't hear. The way she smiled while signing away my name. Why would a daughter betray her father like that? What had I done to deserve being erased? The answer to that question isn't what you think. And by the time you hear it, you'll wonder, who's the real victim here? Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when the forgotten refuse to stay forgotten. And trust me, this fight is far from over. Before all of this, before the lawyers, before the locked doors, before my own daughter looked me in the eye and called me unfit, my life was simple. Not small. Not boring. Just simple in the best way. I was a literature teacher for over 40 years. I loved words, how they could build or destroy, mend or manipulate. I believed in the quiet strength of books. Of stories. My name is Edward Morera. Most people called me Mr. Morera or Ed, but there was a time, long ago, when one person called me Daddy with the kind of love that could bring a man to his knees. That person was Clara, my only daughter. After my wife passed, it was just the two of us. I poured everything I had into being a good father. I made her lunch until high school, read to her at night well into her teenage years, and walked her down the aisle even when my legs weren't what they used to be. When Clara's marriage fell apart, I didn't say, "I told you so." I opened my arms. She and her son, Nico, moved in with me. My pension wasn't much, but we made it work. I sold a few things, tightened my belt, but never once regretted helping. I wanted to be the safety net. That's what fathers do. Clara was different after the divorce, colder, distracted, always calculating. She started saying things like, "You're not as sharp as you used to be, Dad," whenever I forgot where I left the keys. It was subtle. Almost loving. Almost. I chalked it up to stress. Single parenting is brutal. I'd seen my wife carry the weight for years. So I didn't question it. I didn't push back. And Nico. Nico was my heart. Quiet, bookish, a little too observant for his age. He saw everything. He'd sit next to me during my morning tea, reading the paper with me like a little old man in training. He never said much, but when he did, it was always something that made me feel seen. Respected. Looking back now, I think he sensed what was coming long before I did. I remember the first time Clara asked about my finances. It wasn't aggressive. Just curious. "Dad, you should let me help with your bills. It's getting to be a lot, isn't it?" She said it with a smile. With her hand on my shoulder. As if she were doing me a favor. I didn't want to be a burden. So I said yes. That was the first yes in a long line of yeses that chipped away at who I was. Yes, to giving her access to my accounts. Yes, to letting her take over the property taxes. Yes, to canceling my driving license just for safety. Yes, to moving in with her so she could keep an eye on me. Each one seemed logical, reasonable, even generous. But together, they became a slow erasure. And yet, I didn't suspect anything. Not really. Because it's hard to imagine your own child would ever hurt you. Harder still to believe they might see you not as a parent, but as a problem to be solved. Or worse, a wallet to be emptied. If I had noticed sooner, if I had trusted my instincts instead of dismissing them as paranoia, maybe none of this would have happened. But that's the trick with betrayal. It doesn't come with warning signs. It wears the face of someone you love. It uses the voice you trust most. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already handed over the keys. Literally. I thought I was protecting Clara after her divorce. But I never imagined I'd need protection from her. It didn't happen all at once. Losing your independence isn't like a switch flipping, it's more like a slow leak. A tiny drip at first. You don't even notice it until everything around you is wet and cold and unfamiliar. That's how it started with Clara. She didn't storm in and take control. She came in through the side door, sweet words, soft smiles, careful suggestions. It felt like love. Or something like it. The first thing she took was my schedule. Dad, don't worry about making appointments anymore. I'll call your doctors, keep everything organized for you. Just rest. It sounded nice. Thoughtful, even. I didn't resist. I was tired. Who wouldn't be? I was in my late 70s, and honestly, it felt good to let someone else take the wheel for a while. Next, it was my mail. So much junk, Dad. I'll go through it first and just give you the important stuff. That's what she said as she pulled the envelopes from my hands. I laughed. Sure, take the bills, I joked. Be my guest. I had no idea that, inside one of those junk envelopes, was a bank notification about a new joint account being opened in both our names. Then came the car. One day she watched me backing out of the driveway a little slower than usual. I was cautious, not confused. But by dinner, she had printed out a DMV form and slid it across the table. Let's retire your license before something happens. You've had a good run behind the wheel. It wasn't a conversation. It was a decision wrapped in concern. And the way she looked at me, I didn't want to disappoint her. Or worse, make her worry. So I signed it. That signature? It felt small at the time. Like another harmless yes. But in reality, it was one more line in a growing contract I hadn't realized I was signing. I still had my routines, my tea in the morning, reading on the porch, old records in the afternoon. But slowly, those moments were interrupted too. Let's sell some of these books, Dad. They're just collecting dust. Don't go outside today. It's too cold. You already read that one, remember? Her words began to shape my days, my space, my mind. And the worst part? I thought she was doing it because she cared. That's how subtle it was. Because love and control wear the same face when you don't know what to look for. Meanwhile, Nico noticed everything. He was always watching, always listening. He'd come sit beside me when Clara wasn't around and whisper things like, "You're not crazy, Grandpa. I see what she's doing." I'd laugh it off, ruffle his hair, tell him not to worry. But he was right to worry. He saw what I couldn't, or maybe what I didn't want to admit. The final straw came one night after dinner. Clara stood at the sink washing dishes. The light hit her face just right, and for a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who used to beg me to read Charlotte's Web 3 times in one night. And then she said, "Dad, I've been thinking. It might be better if I took full legal guardianship. Just for peace of mind." She said it like she was offering to walk the dog or water the plants. Casual. Routine. But my heart sank. Guardianship? That wasn't just about helping. That was about ownership. That was a legal wall between me and my own life. Still, I nodded. Okay. Whatever you think is best. Because by then, I had been softened. Hollowed out. When someone chips away at your decisions, your autonomy, your confidence, it doesn't take long before you start to doubt your own instincts. I started second-guessing myself. Did I really forget my doctor's appointment, or did she move it without telling me? Was I misplacing things, or were they being taken from me? Was I tired, or was I depressed? I didn't know anymore. And once you stop trusting yourself, it's easy to start trusting someone else. Even if they're the one pulling the strings. That was the brilliance of Clara's approach. She didn't need to force anything. She just waited for me to hand everything over willingly. One yes at a time. I used to think betrayal came in loud moments, doors slammed, voices raised, angry letters written in haste. But now I know, the most dangerous betrayals are the quiet ones. The ones that arrive with folded laundry and warm soup. The ones that smile while they erase you. It wasn't just about helping me anymore. Clara had crossed some invisible line, but she made sure I didn't see it until I was already on the wrong side of it. By the time I realized what was happening, I was no longer part of the conversation. I was the subject of it. It started with a doctor's visit. She insisted on going in with me. Just to help explain things, she said. But when the doctor asked a question, she answered for me. When I did speak, she interrupted, laughed it off. He's been a little forgetful lately, haven't you, Dad? I sat there, unsure how to respond. Was I being forgetful? I didn't think so. But the doctor scribbled something down, nodded slowly, and asked no further questions. I found out later Clara had called ahead. She'd told them I was having cognitive issues. She was laying the foundation. And I, unknowingly, was helping her build it. A week later, a woman showed up at the house with a clipboard and a badge clipped to her shirt. A court-appointed evaluator. Just routine, Clara said. Nothing to worry about. I tried to answer every question clearly, but I felt myself stumbling. Not because I was confused, but because I was afraid. Afraid that any wrong word could be twisted. That hesitation would be used against me. That my own daughter might weaponize my pauses. And she did. Within a month, Clara had filed for guardianship. Emergency guardianship, to be exact. She claimed I was no longer able to make safe decisions for myself. And just like that, everything I had, the house, my accounts, my legal rights, were put in limbo. A court hearing was scheduled. I had no lawyer. Clara didn't tell me I could get one. Didn't explain what was really happening. She told me, calmly, it's just to keep things from getting messy. You'll still have a say, Dad. I promise. But I never got a say. Instead, I received a letter. A single sheet of paper that might as well have been a death certificate. It named Clara as my temporary guardian pending review. It froze my assets. It stated, plainly, that I was no longer considered capable of managing my own life. I stared at it for hours. I kept rereading one sentence, Mr. Moreira shall not make financial or legal decisions without the approval of the court-appointed guardian. I wanted to scream. But who would I scream to? My phone had been replaced with a simpler model Clara insisted on. Half my contacts were gone. My bank cards no longer worked. Even my mail came in pre-sorted. Clara's hand had already opened and removed anything she thought was too complicated. I was isolated, but not in some dramatic way. I still had my room. My books. Meals on time. A smile here and there. To the outside world, everything looked fine. Kind, even. But behind the curtains, I had become invisible. The worst part? I started to believe maybe she was right. Maybe I was slipping. Maybe I did need help. That's the thing no one tells you about emotional manipulation. It doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. One day, I tried to withdraw money for a book I wanted. The ATM screen flashed red, access denied. That's when it hit me. I was a prisoner. just without bars. My daughter held the keys. And I didn't even know what I had done to deserve the cell. But something in me stirred that day, something old, something quiet, something stubborn. They say when you have nothing left to lose, you start paying attention to what they've taken. And I was finally paying attention. I felt invisible long before the wheelchairs and white walls arrived. It began with subtle pauses in conversation. When Clara called my doctor, I could no longer choose who would visit. When the mail came, it came through her filter, nice on the surface, but censored. She decided what news I got, what bills I saw, what they said about me. I was cut off from my life piece by piece, a conversation with my nephew, an invite to church, even my favorite poetry group. Clara offered excuses. You're tired, Dad. Let's skip it this week. So I stayed home. Quiet. Alone. That was the plan. Next came the legal paperwork. Forms I couldn't read without someone translating. Guardianship. Conservatorship. Court-appointed overseers. Big words for a man who always faced uncertainty with a grin and a quotation. 3 papers arrived at once, each heavier than the last. One named Clara my temporary guardian. Another froze my bank accounts. A third asked for my signature. I don't read legalese, so I signed. I assumed it was the next step in getting help. I trusted her. Later, I learned the form said much more. That I needed permission to leave the house. That I couldn't sell anything. That any decisions about my personal life, my clothes, my phone, my routines weren't mine anymore. It wasn't just her words that isolated me. It was the law. Courts are quiet until someone uses them like a hammer. Clara quietly told people, neighbors, relatives, even the pastor, that I was losing it. That anyone who insisted on doing things Dad's way was making a horrible mistake. She controlled my narrative. She decided who believed me and who didn't. I saw it in Mrs. Vasquez, a social worker assigned to check in on me. The first few times she asked me questions, Clara hovered like a hawk. Waited. Made sure she answered first. He's been forgetful, she'd say. We're just making sure everything's safe. Mrs. Vasquez nodded as if that was enough. Never asked to speak to me alone. Never asked if I still remembered my favorite poem or if I'd ever read aloud to Nico. By then, my world felt smaller. Not because the walls closed in, but because my voice was gone. I remember the first night in the care home. I lay in bed, knees pulled up, listening to hushed conversations, other men and women, awake, waiting for sleep. And I realized I didn't know this quiet anymore. My home used to laugh and argue, whisper and shout. It used to fill with books and old records, with life. Now I had a fading TV and a daily schedule that someone else managed. I thought guardianship would bring me help and peace. It brought me control. And isolation. But hope has a way of finding cracks in every wall. It came from Nico. He would slip me small notes hidden in my favorite book, tiny sticky tabs over an upside-down chapter. I keep looking for you. Another day, don't let her erase your smile. It was childish handwriting, but his words felt like a lifeline. One afternoon, Mrs. Vasquez finally asked if she could see me alone. She sat across from me, her clipboard resting on the table between us. There was a tiredness in her eyes, a hesitation. You're not at all like someone losing their mind, she said softly. I've worked with many older folks. Most of them expect to forget things. But you seem present. I found my voice again that day. Quiet at first. Then steady. Why can't I speak for myself? She didn't have an answer. Nico and I shared a look across the room like an echo. We both understood the weight of that question. That single question started a crack in the glass. It didn't shatter the isolation. But it gave me a path through it. Because no matter how thinly controlled your life becomes, your voice can still be heard, and someone out there might just be listening. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, that I could matter again. It was a Tuesday. Funny how betrayal doesn't wait for a dramatic moment. No thunderstorm. No ominous music. Just an ordinary Tuesday, with lukewarm coffee and the buzz of fluorescent lights. I wasn't supposed to hear what I heard. Clara thought I was asleep. She was on the phone in the hallway, pacing just outside my room in the care home, my new residence, as she called it. I don't think I'll ever forget her voice. Not how it sounded when I read her bedtime stories, not when she cried after her first heartbreak, and definitely not that day when I heard her say, "I sold the house last week." He has no clue. Honestly, at this point, he thinks he's lucky just to have a bed. Silence. Then laughter. Her laughter. It didn't sound evil. That's what haunted me the most. It was casual. Relaxed. Like she was talking about the weather. That house, it wasn't just where I lived. It was where I built my life. Where I watched Clara take her first steps, where I danced with my wife in the kitchen at midnight, where I wrote love letters I never sent and poems I never shared. And now it was gone. She sold it like it meant nothing. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, not from rage, but from something colder. Heavier. A grief I hadn't felt since I buried her mother. That was the moment I stopped pretending. Stopped making excuses for her. Stopped believing this was all some well-intentioned mistake. Because love doesn't sell your memories behind your back. It doesn't laugh while you're being erased. Clara didn't just take control. She took my history. My dignity. My name. And I couldn't deny it anymore. My own daughter didn't see me as a father. She saw me as an obstacle. A signature. A source of money and silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the small desk by the window, staring at a blank sheet of paper. Then I picked up a pen. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. If they wouldn't give me a voice in court, I'd write one myself. Word by word, I started building the case they tried to bury. I didn't know how or when I'd be heard, but I knew one thing for certain. She took everything from me. But I still had the truth. And the truth is louder than silence. Sometimes rescue doesn't come with sirens. Sometimes it walks in quietly. Sits down across from you. And listens. Mrs. Vasquez came back the next week, alone this time. No clipboard. No rushed tone. Just a mug of tea in her hands and a question in her eyes. She looked at me, not through me, not past me, but at me, and said, "You wrote something, didn't you?" I nodded. I handed her the letter I'd been hiding under my mattress. Pages of everything Clara had done. The forged documents. The closed accounts. The house. My house. Gone. Mrs. Vasquez read every word. Carefully. Slowly. No interruptions. Then she said 5 words I hadn't heard in months. "You were right to write." That was the first time I felt real air in my lungs again. But that wasn't the only surprise waiting for me. Nico. My grandson. My quiet observer. He had been watching this unfold like a storm building over the sea, knowing it would break but not knowing when. That day, he slipped into the room after school, backpack slung over one shoulder. He pulled out a phone. Not his. Not Clara's. A burner phone he'd bought with his own savings. On it? A recording. I listened, heart pounding, as Clara's voice played through the tiny speaker. Cold. Calculating. Bragging about how she'd made sure he couldn't speak in court without looking senile. Nico looked at me with the kind of fierce loyalty only the betrayed can understand. I couldn't protect you, Grandpa. So I started collecting proof. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. This was more than a turning point. It was a transfer of power. A child protecting his elder. A quiet worker believing in my voice. 2 people saying, in their own ways, "We see you. We believe you." And maybe most important, we're not afraid of her anymore. From that moment, the tide began to turn. It wasn't a roar. It was a ripple. But ripples grow. And sometimes all it takes is one small wave to bring down a dam. The courtroom felt different this time. Not colder. Not quieter. Just charged. Like the truth was finally stretching its limbs, ready to be heard. Clara sat at the front, polished and composed, flipping through her papers with the ease of someone who still believed she was in control. She didn't even glance in my direction. But I saw the flicker in her eyes when Mrs. Vasquez entered the room. And again when Nico walked in beside her. He wasn't a child that day. He was a witness. The judge called my name. I stood. No cane. No one guiding me. Just me. There was a pause in the room. As if no one expected me to speak for myself. But I did. I looked straight ahead and said, I may be 80 years old. I may walk slower and forget names sometimes. But I have not forgotten who I am. My voice didn't shake. I told them everything, how my daughter had taken over my life under the pretense of protection, how she sold my house without my knowledge, how she manipulated the system with charm and forged concern. I read from the letter I wrote by hand, pausing only when the courtroom grew too quiet to breathe. Mrs. Vasquez played the recordings. The judge listened. Clara's mask cracked, little by little, with every word. She tried to speak, but this time, no one rushed to defend her. No one could. When the ruling came, it felt like air after drowning. Guardianship revoked. Assets unfrozen. Independent counsel assigned. And Clara? Stripped of control. Ordered to undergo review. The system that once handed her power now demanded accountability. As for me, I went home. Not to the same house, Clara had sold that. But to a quiet apartment filled with my books, my records, my writing desk. My name on the lease. My name on everything. Nico visits every week. We make tea. We laugh. We talk about the court date like a strange dream that we both somehow woke up from. And sometimes, when he leaves, he hugs me tighter than usual. Like he knows we survived something sacred. Which we did. This wasn't just about getting my rights back. It was about remembering that I never lost them to age, I had them taken. And the moment I believed in my voice again, everything began to shift. Because the moment you stop letting people speak for you, you become impossible to silence. I don't need a grand ending. No movie-style music. No standing ovation. No fairy tale reunion. What I needed was never applause. It was dignity. And I got it back. These days, my mornings are slow in mine. I sip my tea in silence. I read the paper front to back. I underline sentences that feel like they were written just for me. Nico still visits. Mrs. Vasquez checks in now and then. But mostly, I live quietly, with the simple joy of owning my time again. People think abuse looks like bruises or shouting. But sometimes, it wears pearls. Smiles politely. Says it's just looking out for you. That's the trick of guardianship abuse, it's not always loud. It doesn't always slam doors. Sometimes, it speaks in soft tones and legal terms, and no one questions it, until it's too late. But I hope my story makes someone question it sooner. Because age is not incompetence. Being vulnerable doesn't mean being disposable. And no one has the right to decide when your voice stops mattering. I'm 80. They wrote me off. But I wrote myself back in. And if you're watching this, wondering if your silence is the only option, let me tell you. It isn't. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not alone. The justice system may be slow, but truth? Truth moves through people. And once it finds a crack, it echoes. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking you to pay attention. Because next time, it might be your father. Your neighbor. Or one day, you. And when it is, may you remember. Silence might keep the peace, but truth makes it right.